Tonight on One News, whipped by the wind, flames surround Sydney in the worst bushfires for a generation.
Yep.
A gamble goes wrong for a retail giant forced to pull a children's pokie machine from the shelves.
Looking for a less bumpy ride, a top racing personality cruises off across the Tasman.
And the stars come out for Peter Jackson's second red carpet walk as Master of the Rings.
We begin with a city under siege from flames that won't be tamed.
Gale force winds are tonight bringing new terror to the outskirts of Sydney. They're whipping up bushfires that have already claimed scores of homes. Thousands of firefighters have been joined by reinforcements who've poured in from other states. In just 3 days, the bushfires have turned into the most devastating in 3 decades. And today they claimed their first life. The body of a 71-year-old man was found in a burnt-out caravan northwest of Sydney. We'll cross live to Steve Marshall in Sydney in a moment, but first, the day's battle.
Wild, unpredictable winds saw some fire fronts double in size overnight. You can see just how quick the flames move, ripping through bushland towards inner city suburbs. The pace frightening, forcing firefighters into property protection mode throughout the night.
It's like a steam engine ploughing along there. It's huge. The rate of knots it moves at, it's incredible. Yeah.
Incredibly, these raging flames claim just one house and a handful of other buildings. But in Sydney's west, fire claimed its first life, that of a 71-year-old man who was found in a caravan. By morning, danger still lurked.
Trains will not service stations between Hawkesbury River and...
Train lines and major highways remain closed, leaving many commuters stranded.
Everyone's basically just waiting for news, waiting to hear the 3 words that they want to hear. F3's open.
By mid-morning, trucks were escorted through, but the opening was short-lived. Victorian crews joined the fight today, bringing the total number of firefighters to more than 4,500. There was some relief in southern areas with light rainfall, but it hardly removed the threat.
We were having 10-metre flame heights in places while rain was falling, and that's almost unprecedented. Nevertheless, the fires are continuing to burn quite strongly under these very gusty winds that we're facing.
Those winds are pushing a blaze through the Ku-ring-gai National Park in Sydney's north, along the same path of the devastating 1994 bushfires, although conditions aren't as severe. Even though temperatures have dropped, the swirling winds continue as firefighters and residents fight side by side to save properties and lives.
And I thought I'd lose this place, but it's still here, well, so far.
Steve, you're right in the heart of the city. Put this in perspective for us. How close are those fires getting? I mean, is that smoke behind you?
It certainly is, Richard, and even with the swirling wind, that is smoke behind me, and hopefully we can cut to a shot now that will give you my perspective of the top of this building. Now, of course, that is not cloud, that is smoke behind me, and that is coming from about 30 to 40 kilometres away. And I can tell you it is surrounding the city at this stage. There are many, many firefighters down at the front. At last count, 4,500, creeping up to 5,500. Now, the last chap I showed you in my story, the guy that was trying to save his house, that is about 45 kilometres up the road, up towards Gosford, that is northwest. And that is where the biggest trouble will hit tonight. And it's at this time of the afternoon when the winds really do pick up, and that's when we see a lot of trouble happening. So those people up that way are in for a tough, tough night, Richard.
Now, these firefighters have been battling these blazes, what, for 3 days now. Is there any sign that they're getting any closer to controlling them?
Well, when we woke up this morning, we thought this could be the day they might be able to get on top, because the previous night, as you saw at the start of my story, those incredible shots of the wind just throwing fire from treetop to treetop and taking on houses and just anything in its path. Now,
about a worst drought we've had for about 100 years. This is impacting very severely on our firefighting operations. But to the credit of the thousands of firefighters, we've had, at this stage, very minimal property loss and very few injuries. We've had some unreported, unconfirmed reports of fatalities. It's still really hard to get a full handle on just what sort of infrastructure damage has occurred. At this stage, our priority, of course, is to protect houses and save people. And despite the incredibly difficult fire operations and weather conditions, we have been extremely successful.
Superintendent, at this point, is there any end in sight, or is it simply a matter of some rain coming or the fires running out of things to burn?
Well, there's still a lot left to burn. What we need is days of heavy torrential rain. But believe it or not, just last weekend, we did have several days of torrential rain in these suburbs. Within a matter of 3 or 4 days, we're now facing horrendous firefighting conditions. It's a build-up of a number of situations. We've had heavy fuel loading, which has built up over the years. One of our worst droughts in 100 years. All these factors are contributing to some pretty dramatic conditions that we are facing here. But once again, an enormous effort by all the fire services. We have the New South Wales Fire Brigades, our Rural Fire Service volunteers, our National Parks and Wildlife, and currently a number of crews coming in from interstate. And you can hear the helicopters around us. A big mammoth effort that is taking place here, and to the credit of everyone, we have only had minimal loss at this stage.
I can also see the smoke. It is, you know, it is swirling and ebbing around you. How far is the smoke across Sydney? Is the city blanketed?
The Sydney metropolitan area basically is entirely blanketed in smoke. Bear in mind, to the north of the city, to the west of the city and the south of the city, we've had 3 major fire outbreaks which have destroyed property. These fires have burnt out thousands of hectares. The smoke haze is continuing. Normally in our firefighting operations, when it comes to night time, it's a time to consolidate and try and put containment lines around the fires. But due to the horrendous conditions and the dryness of the fuel loading, even this morning at 2 a.m. this morning, I was at a fire where we were directly trying to protect properties that were under direct threat of fire. This is quite unusual. It's not normal fire behaviour, and it certainly doesn't fare well for the months to come. Certainly December and particularly January is always a critical period for us. We're seeing this fire season attack us very early, and we do have some concerns about what is yet to come over the months ahead of us.
Superintendent, I thank you very much for your time today, and we'll let you get back to the job at hand.
My pleasure.
Superintendent Ian Crimmer there, and wasn't that smoke behind him telling a story of its own? Well, police statistics released today show a house that's been burgled in Auckland City has a 1 in 5 chance of being burgled again. A repeat burglary likely to happen within 60 days. So we're going to show you how to ensure your home is burglar-proof, or as burglar-proof as possible, for the summer holidays. Dan Dudson is a former burglar turned security consultant. He is with us now from a house in Auckland with 10 tips to keep the burglars out. Starting off on the outside of the house. How are you, Dan? What are you seeing there for us?
Hi, g'day. Well, I thought I'd give you the biggest tip of the season. That's don't use this. Now, this is anti-crime spray. And a lot of people will put this around the windows and doors and they think that's all they've got to do to protect their home. 30,000 people will be burgled over the holiday period. And this is what we've got to understand. First thing the burglars are going to look for is actually the rubbish tin. This is an information centre, not just a rubbish tin. You don't want an empty one. The best advertising you can have is for a big, fresh dog tin to be in it. The second thing is, let's look into the garden and you'll see you've got a choice here whether you want to have a bottle advertising that you don't want dogs on the property, in other words, you haven't got one, or you want to have a whole lot of fresh weeds put here by neighbours from neighbourhood support, and that is telling the crims that someone has been here, someone is weeding the garden today, and probably at home. Those little things are what people need to know for a start.
Dan, tell me, why don't you just use the anti-crime spray? Is it just not enough on its own, or is the product's not great? What's the story with that?
No, it's just my little invention to let you know. This is what a lot of people do. They don't put any more thought into it and thinking that they've got to sort of bless the house, say 3 Hail Marys, and that'll do.
I'm with you. I wasn't with you at the beginning. Okay, Dan, and Dan, you're going to go inside the house and show us a few more tips in there a little later on.
Will do.
Cheers. Well, coming up a little later on, what got faith, prayers and All Black pride, what got All Black star Jonah Lomu through the recent All Black tour.
A nation of Pacific lambs to the slaughter. 3 eyes for my son, an extra foot for my daughter.
Next thing I knew, I was just had all this pain just kick in through my stomach and so forth. And I started shaking.